Okay, today I am really excited to have Justin Kan on the program. You know Justin, an amazing founder and investor, thinker. He's got a great YouTube channel. What we did on today's show is we did a live restream with my YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/thisweekin, and Justin's, which is youtube.com/JustinKanTV, which you should go subscribe to. And Restream let us publish to both. We had both of our audiences asking us interesting questions, and we just riffed. Just two entrepreneurs, two startup thinkers, two podcasters, and two investors riffing for about an hour. I think it went over an hour. And it was just great to catch up with Justin. And then both of our YouTube audiences got to see it. So I want to do these like once a month. I think we'll have Gary Tan do one. If you know of anybody else, I think Downtown Josh Brown would be cool. Maybe doing Pomp would be cool. Anybody who's doing streaming on YouTube on a regular basis and understands how to do a live stream would qualify for this. So if you have an idea for somebody who would be a good collaboration, just email producers at thisweekinstartups.com. It'll go to all three producers and me. But before we get to that, we have to talk about Miramax suing Quentin Tarantino over his NFT project and my idea for the most brilliant DAO of all time, the QT, the Quentin DAO. Coming soon, I hope. Stick with us. It's going to be a great episode.
This Week in Startups is brought to you by Fiverr Business is a modern workplace for the digital world. Their team of dedicated business success managers help match you with the best freelancers for your team. Right now, you can sign up for Fiverr Business free for the first year and save 10% on your purchase with promo code JASON. That's fiverr.com/business and use promo code JASON. Embroker's startup insurance program helps startups secure the most important types of insurance at a lower cost and with less hassle. Save up to 20% off traditional insurance today at embroker.com/twist. While you're there, get an extra 10% off using offer code TWIST. And Microacquire, the startup acquisition marketplace. Start the right acquisition conversations at your own pace. Get free and instant access to over 100,000 trusted buyers with total anonymity. Say goodbye to brokers and meet your ideal buyer today. Go to trymicroacquire.com/twist.
Quentin Tarantino is being sued by the production company Miramax over his Pulp Fiction NFT plans. Yes, basically, so you understand, Quentin Tarantino decided to make some NFTs. He's been getting pitched on this for some amount of time. I saw online in an interview, somebody was explaining NFTs to him, and he kind of thought it was interesting. So he took 7 pages of the Pulp Fiction script and was going to make an NFT out of 7 pages that were left out, scenes that are not in the movie. What a clever, great idea. Now, the only problem is Miramax owns Pulp Fiction, and the way these contracts tend to work, having seen them up close when I worked at Sony Music or other media companies, you buy a piece of IP, intellectual property, like a movie or a song or an album or a piece of art or a comic book character or a comic book or a book. And in that contract, it says, we have the right to develop this in the future, in perpetuity, in all mediums, known and unknown in the future. In other words, if new mediums come out, we get to exploit this IP, and that's included in the price we paid you for it. So I'm assuming, I don't know this, that his contract, when they bought Pulp Fiction, they bought all rights to it, including sequels and this other stuff, which is why sometimes you'll see a director say, I have nothing to do with the Exorcist sequel. I have nothing to do with the Jaws sequels beyond number 2, whatever. I don't even know. Spielberg probably wasn't involved in even number 2. So the sequel rights is obviously a big thing. And then there's what's called derivative rights, things made like merchandise, and they're outlined in contracts, and you can negotiate that I get to keep the merchandise. In fact, George Lucas did that famously with Star Wars. That's why he became so rich. It was because he used his money to pay for the creation of the Star Wars movies, but kept the merchandise rights, et cetera, et cetera. He wound up obviously selling all of that IP to Disney. And now Disney, if they want to sell NFTs, I don't think Lucas gets to sell his NFTs. However, this is untested law because there are a couple of issues here. Well, these are things Quentin Tarantino wrote, but did not sell, right? These were not sold as part of Pulp Fiction. They didn't buy the original script. If they did buy the original script, they certainly didn't buy the notes or pages around it. But they do own the title Pulp Fiction. So then you would make the argument, well, you're trafficking in our IP and using our IP to sell these things that are adjacent to it. Now, if he just took the 7 pages from the script and he sold them at an auction, I don't think that Miramax would care. But I think Miramax is owned by Disney. I believe somebody can fact check me on that. Therefore, Disney probably wants to put their foot down on this and say, wait, we got to stop this before, Stan Lee's estate or, somebody who drew Iron Man starts going in their draws and says, listen, I got 100 copies of sketches I did of Iron Man. I'm going to start selling them. Okay, so the Walt Disney Company owned Miramax from 93 to 2010. It got sold to a couple different holding companies, and now it's owned by Viacom CBS, according to Disney.fandom.com. Now, if you owned a copy of a comic book, if I owned a comic book and I cut each of the pages and I made, 60 pages of this graphic novel and I framed them and I sold them page by page, am I allowed to do that? Yes, I am. I bought that comic book. I chopped it up. But now if I make another work out of like a digital work, am I allowed to make a new story of it? Am I allowed to cut them up and make a montage and then play that into a film? Of course not, right? So these laws, when they hit new technologies, always get tested. It's not really a big deal. This happened with DVDs and CDs and streaming famously. And generally there's a negotiation if people feel like they're getting the raw end of the stick because you want somebody to maybe participate. So the right way to do this, and what you'll eventually see here is the director, Quentin Tarantino, will then go on to Miramax and they would cut a deal where Quentin would say, listen, I have this archive of all of this interesting stuff. I want an NFT. Do you have an preferred NFT platform? They're like, yeah, we do it with this company, or we started our own NFT platform. Great. So Quentin Tarantino's collection, Ridley Scott's collection of Blade Runner and Gladiator stuff in partnership with Disney would then sell them, right? So that's how this stuff tends to work out. And so according to the Wall Street Journal, Bart Williams, who is a partner at the law firm of Prosper Rose, I think is how you pronounce it, on behalf of Miramax stated, quote, it was profoundly disappointing to learn of this deliberate, premeditated, short-term money grab by the Tarantino team to unilaterally circumvent Miramax's rights to Pulp Fiction through the illicit development, promotion, and distribution of NFTs. So that's a pretty over-the-top statement. I don't know why they would be so aggressive about this. They, I'm assuming, went to Quentin Tarantino and said, like, hey, let's work something out first. But Tarantino probably told them to pound salt because maybe he doesn't agree with them, or maybe he's got some past friction with them. And this is part of an overall negotiation. Remember, we saw something similar with none other than Dave Chappelle and the Chappelle Show. And he was like, hey, don't watch the Chappelle Show. They're screwing me out of money. And then I guess Comedy Central and Chappelle figured out a way to bury their beef, which is good because then Chappelle gets to work on this IP and support it in the future. In fact, when Howard Stern left terrestrial radio, part of him leaving, and I think staying for an extra year or something, was when he negotiated his further contracts, he said, I want to own my tapes. I want all of my tapes for history to be owned by me, my masters, basically, not these other Westwood One or whoever he worked for previously. I'm not sure. And he actually owns his archive now. And I think with his deal with Sirius, he owns a company that then gives them the show, but he still retains his IP on all of that. So as you move up the stack, you can then reacquire your IP and use your current partnership as bait for that. So what Tarantino should do here is you should go to Miramax and say, listen, I want to have some ownership in my archive or something like that. Is there some deal we could cut here? But, there's really no reason for the movie studios to do that. So, he's only going to do one more of these. I don't see it as a money grab. I see it as an experiment, and maybe they should collaborate on it. If you're trying to nail an important project before the end of the year, you might need some extra help. I know I do. Well, look no further than Fiverr Business. Fiverr Business puts a world of expert freelancers at your fingertips so you can get any project across the finish line and be really proud of your work. It is really hard to hire full-time people right now. Plus, Fiverr has everything you need to seamlessly integrate your new team members into your workflow. We love Fiverr here at Launch. We hired a bunch of researchers, right? So we were able to scale up very quickly. They went out and they got us leads. And I didn't have to take my key employees off of investing in companies or producing the podcast. They just took the research and they started on second or third base. Fiverr just works. So stop wasting time searching for talent that may never arrive. Just leave it to Fiverr Business. They have a team of dedicated business success managers that will help match you with the best talent for your team. But man, if you get that business success manager, they're going to handhold you. So no more endless guessing, no more interviews. You can also save your favorite freelancers for future projects, which is kind of cool. So find the freelancers you need and give your next project the boost that it needs to give you a strong finish. Right now, you can sign up for Fiverr Business absolutely free for the first year. Get 1 free year and save 10% on your purchase of Fiverr Business with the promo code JASON. That's right. Go to fiverr.com/business and don't forget the promo code JASON, JASON. That's fiverr.com/business. Remember, there's 2 R's in Fiverr. fiverr.com/business. Use the promo code JASON. Mr. Tarantino announced his plans earlier this month. A release through TarantinoNFTs.com promoting the auction says the artifacts will get a, quote, glimpse into the mind and creative process of Quentin Tarantino. The 7 unused scenes from the movie will also contain audio commentary, according to the release. Now, audio commentary, he would be allowed to do. So if he wrote a book about his experience writing about the characters, that would be really hard for them to stop. So what he should do here is not call Pulp Fiction. It should be called the Tarantino Sessions. And he should just sell the Tarantino Sessions, where he talks about every character he's created in every movie. And that would be just his commentary like a novel. And I think they would have no leg to stand on. It's just his commentary on my inspiration for creating a character. If George Lucas made an NFT on where I came up with, the character Boba Fett and what was I thinking at that time, well, he could do that on an interview show, in a book, in a blog post. He could monetize it. I don't see how that would be illegal. But when you start using the name Pulp Fiction, or you start using imagery from Pulp Fiction, which this does in a very clever way. They don't have the actors' faces on the website. They just have the iconic suit and a little bit of blood. And the font style evokes Pulp Fiction. And so I think that's probably what they are objecting to. Miramax alleges that Mr. Tarantino reserve rights were limited to the film's soundtrack, music publishing, live performance, print publication, comic books, and theatrical and television sequel and spin-off rights. So that's super fascinating that he owns the rights to theatrical and television sequel and spin-off rights. So an even easier thing for Tarantino to do here would be the further adventures of, name a Pulp Fiction character. Super easy. And that would be worth more. Or what happened to this person? So you do some sequel or whatever. Quote, Tarantino's limited reserved rights under the operative agreements are far too narrow for him to unilaterally produce, market, and sell Pulp Fiction NFTs, the suit says. I don't know if I agree with him, given that he owns the spin-off rights. Because these 7 pages contributed to the original Pulp Fiction, I think that's where he's getting himself in trouble. So he should just burn those NFTs and he should just stick it to them by doing all of the spin-off rights. And then he could say, I had an original idea, but I changed it, and here's my new idea, right? Boom. So how are they going to stop him there? Miramax partnered with Mr. Tarantino on many of his movies, but none of the recent ones. I guess Jackie Brown and Kill Bill Volumes 1 and 2. Miramax was run famously by the Weinstein brothers. Here's the thing. There's a certain subset of rights, as I talked about. You can negotiate all kinds of things. But forward-looking stuff, it's very hard for people to control what you do in the future. If really Tarantino wants to get in on this crypto grift, there is a much easier way. And I had written about this with crowdfunding 20 years ago. I may have even talked about it on this podcast. I had the idea that if Quentin Tarantino, I think I wrote this in Silicon Alley Reporter at some point in a blog post, or maybe I wrote it on my own personal blog. If Quentin Tarantino were to say, I'm going to write 10 more movies. I'm going to write, produce, or make 10 more movies. Because he said he was going to do 10. And he's working on the last one now, and he wants it to be a slam dunk. And then I've heard him in these interviews he did recently. Shout out to Brian Koppelman's The Moment, Joe Rogan, and also Brett Easton Ellis. They did 3 really great, very long interviews with Tarantino, and it was fascinating. I would watch all 3 of those. Brett Easton Ellis is behind a paywall, very much worth paying for his podcast on Patreon. If you were to go out and say, I'm going to create a DAO, and the DAO is for me to make 10 more movies. I'm X years old now. I'm going to do 10 more. I said I was going to do 10, but I'm going to do 10 more. And I'm either going to produce them, write them, or direct them. Some combination of those. So no promises here, but I might hire a co-writer, write it with them and let them direct it. I might, have a story idea, whatever. And if you buy into these, I'll make them and we will put them into the public archives, or you will have some governance or voting in this, but he would have $100 million show up immediately because he's got that large of a fan base that wants to see him do this work. And if they had some upside in it where they got to be a producer, let's say anybody who did that got to have a frame in the movie at the end with, over $10,000, they get their own title card. If they're $1,000, they share it with 5 people. You could actually do a formula for that, right? Like 10,000 and above, you get your own title card, which, calls you something. If you're $1,000, you share it with 5. If you're $100, you share it with 100 people, whatever it is. Would be kind of cool. And then at the end, it might be 20 minutes of producer credit. How funny would that be? There were 20 minutes of producer credits that they had to run at the end of every film. And you could sit there and know when yours was going to come up. It'd be kind of fun. And he could do something like that. I think he would raise $100 million. I don't know. What do you think? All right. Congratulations to Quentin Tarantino on getting in on the amazing crypto grift right now. Sell those NFTs as quick as you can, because who knows how long there will be a line of bag holders out there who want to own JPEGs that have no function in the real world. I'm joking here, but if these NFTs actually had some IP associated with them, that would be cool. So I do think the Bored Ape Yacht Club allows you to have IP in your monkey, your ape. And so if the Bored Apes keep going at this pace, I could see somebody doing a cartoon or something of Bored Apes, or somebody making a Bored Apes, I don't know, DJ or t-shirts or merch. And maybe, who knows, if you bought it for $10,000 and you sold 10,000 t-shirts and made $1 on each, you could actually be profitable. So if the Bored Apes look at themselves like Marvel, who knows? Maybe there's like some crazy comic book world where 10 of the Bored Apes will get together and develop a series. Would you be allowed to do that? I think you own the IP. So could 10 people who own Bored Apes, like Jimmy Fallon owns one, Alexis Ohanian owns, Steph Curry owns one. If you got 10 of those people together, somebody email producers at thisweekinstartups.com or just mention me. Here's an idea. If you do in fact own the IP, 10 of you get together and make the Bored Apes Super Friends. You can call it that. Bored Apes Super Monkeys. Could you then sell that to, I don't know, the Cartoon Network and write your own scripts and make them have superpowers? And then somebody else could take 20 monkeys and do a comic book and call it something else and give them different superpowers and have a different storyline. I think you own the IP, so I think you could do that. That's where I think some of these things get interesting, is with the IP included. So NFTs are garbage. They're a total grift. It's a total scam. You're going to lose all your money in 99 out of 100 of these. But if there's IP associated with them and that IP becomes valuable, then I think there's something there. If you don't have business insurance, you failed one of the first steps of being a great founder. Startups should look no further than Embroker. Embroker's technology saves you time and money. Prices are like up to 20% lower, and they got better coverage than all these slow incumbents. You can go from sign up to quote and purchase in just 10 minutes. I kid you not. And when you work with Embroker, instead of business insurance incumbents, you're not dealing with large, slow corporations. The sign up takes days, not weeks, and the process is so transparent. There's no opaque pricing. There's no negotiation. You just get it all done. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. I'm going to quickly explain to you one crucial type of startup insurance that Embroker covers. It's called E&O. You may have heard it or overheard it. It covers errors and omissions. That'll help you deal with scaling your business. And because any major customer you try to sign up is going to say, hey, can you show us your E&O? Part of the diligence process. So you want to get it now. It's not that expensive. These things are part of the process of growing up as a startup. And you know what? I find sometimes people wait until they get burned to put on their insurance. The insurance is not that expensive. You want to do it proactively, especially if you've raised money recently. That's the perfect time to deploy a little bit of capital into protecting the kingdom, protect your enterprise. So to instantly buy custom-built insurance for startups, go to embroker.com/twist. And while you're there, you get 10% off their already amazing prices by using the offer code TWIST, T-W-I-S-T, Embroker, EMBROKER.com/twist. All right. Thanks for supporting the show, Embroker. Love you guys. Okay, everybody. Welcome to our first collaboration. My man, Justin Kahn, is with me. He's got a YouTube channel. He's an investor. He's an entrepreneur, and he's got opinions. In other words, I think we do the same thing for a living. We talk, we invest, and we make stuff.
I'm just copying you, J. Cal. I'm just trying to, everything you're doing, I'm trying to be doing.
You know, I think live streaming wise, I'm now copying you. It's really interesting. This company Restream that we're using is like your vision from Justin TV, which is now 14 or 15 years ago. When did you start Justin TV?
2007. So yeah, 14 years ago.
14 years ago.
That's how old you are.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I remember using Justin TV. Was it the Nokia N95? Was that like one of the first streaming phones that
that's
allowed
right.
Justin TV?
I forgot about that. Yeah.
Because there was no iPhone. I think there was no iPhone when Justin TV came out. There was no apps. So there was and Nokia N95 was this like flip up phone. And I remember Robert Scoble running around like taking jerky videos. And I remember seeing you, I think Leo Laporte at South by Southwest live streaming with backpacks. Is that right?
I think that's right. Yeah, we had backpack. There was like a backpack with a computer in it and a whole like camera, webcam setup. And then that was how we made our content.
And then eventually, obviously, Twitch came out of Justin TV. Yep.
Twitch, exactly. So we had Justin TV. It started off as us trying to make our own show. The show was not good, to put it kindly. And then luckily we opened up as a platform. Anyone could broadcast. And eventually people were like, hey, we want to broadcast games. And it became Twitch. And the rest is history.
It does say something about when you're an entrepreneur, the ability to pivot or just as you're building stuff and you're being of action and listening to customers, that sometimes you'll just fall into a gold mine or a diamond mine. I mean, it's basically what happened. You had no idea that video games would be the concept here. You were making a modern day Truman Show.
Yeah, we drove the clown car into the diamond mine, as the saying goes.
That's the famous, for people who don't know that reference. Zuckerberg once said Twitter was like a clown car that drove into a gold mine or something. And it was so cruel, but in some ways so accurate and so on brand for Zuckerberg that it stuck. Because it is true. They started, people forget, Odeo was the original idea that Evan Williams was working on. And he wanted to build a platform for podcasting.
Yep.
In the earliest days of podcasting, like, again, 14 years ago.
Before anyone knew what podcasting was.
Nobody knew what podcasting was, and nobody wanted to do it, basically. People thought it was stupid. It was like, you want to do a radio show? Why don't you just, like, what's the point of that? Just do a radio show. And then famously, I think Evan said, we need to come up with something here. And I guess Jack was working on just updating your status. Just what are you doing right now? So the idea was, I believe, inspired by remember Yahoo Messenger had like, you could pick your status?
Yeah.
Like, I'm out.
And AOL, AIM had that too. You could have it too. Status bar and then put a message on it.
Right. You could be like sleeping or in a meeting or whatever. And so it's just to update your thing. But they too stumbled into it. It says something about entrepreneurship. I'm trying to think of a company that didn't stumble into their eventual business model. Uber went from black town cars to ride sharing and then food. Airbnb, they were doing something else too. What was their original business?
They were trying to, I forgot what their original business is, but they had a different business and they were trying to make money to survive and work on their business. So they decided to rent out their apartment, like air mattress on the floor of their apartment for a design conference that was in SF to like generate income so they could pay the rent.
Now just think about that. You're so desperate to make your rent that you come up with a business idea that then becomes arguably one of the 5 best ideas of the last 2 decades in Silicon Valley. I think so.
Yeah. It's incredible. It's incredible. It just proves if you have the right people who are like highly motivated and relatively smart and they're and stink of desperation, then they're going to figure it out if you give them enough time. You're going to figure something out.
And there's like enough time, and then there's sometimes too much time. If you have too much money, you've probably seen this. Companies got like infinite amounts of money. There's no pressure to make the diamond, right?
Yeah, you got to, exactly. You have to, that's the problem with all the people who are successful and try again, like, yours truly, where you have a little too much resources and there's not enough desperation. You have to have like that ticking time bomb of like how much money is in the bank. That's sub 1 year, to keep you motivated.
I find that I think founders do their best work somewhere between 12 and 24 months. So I'm agreeing with you. If it's over 24 months, they're just like, they put the infinity symbol for their runway. Like, we have infinite. And I'm just like, okay. But there is something about that 12 to 18 month window, because fundraising is in a normal market, 3 to 6 months. So if you have 12 months, that means you got to get some shit done for 6 months, and then you got to clear a market with investors again, and they're going to want to see some progress.
Yeah, you have a clear window to figure it out. If you don't figure it out in this time, then you're clearly going to be dead. So you got to do something.
And when you look at the companies you've invested in, what common traits do you see in the people who figure it out in a major way? Not like get to a couple of million in revenue, but the ones who get to tens to hundreds of millions in revenue. Is there something you can think about with those founders that was unique in some way? Because we get this all the time, right? Like when new investors ask us, like, how do you pick founders? And there's so many different types. Like if you look at the Airbnb founders, they're designers, right? They were, not developers. And then you have people who are hardcore developers. You got people who are hardcore business operations people. It can be different archetypes. But do you see some trends or behavior patterns, I'm wondering, in the early days?
Yeah, I think it's those people who, you're like you said, your technical background or whatever, it doesn't matter. It's people who are like business people who are successful, engineers are successful. But the attitude that I look for, that I think is like, it's the people who are both humble enough to know that they don't know most things, and they are always learning from people around them and always trying to iterate their process. But then they're also confident enough to keep going for potentially ever. So it's kind of like that right in the middle of like, there's a humility, healthy dose of like low ego humility. And then there's a deep well of confidence. It's like, I'm going to figure it out. And they have, sometimes that comes from some chip on their shoulder or whatever. They have some insane drive, but like it's a combo of those two things. Like the best founders I know, they're always like learning from people around. Like I remember watching like Drew from Dropbox or Brian from Airbnb, and they would always have like new mentors or new people they were learning from who were like a couple steps ahead of them.
You do see that a lot. The people who seem to be incredibly successful are sponges for information. They seek out knowledge. They ask really great questions. They listen deeply. They take notes. They're just rabid about that. But there's a humility to it, which is, hey, there were people who figured this out before me. I might as well ask them. And then there's this sort of resiliency, and you get the sense that somebody like Travis or Alex from Calm, they're just never going to give up. Vlad from Robinhood, just talking from our portfolio, you just get this like, it's like inevitable. They're going to be successful in their lives. They're just not going to give up no matter what happens, no matter how hard it gets. Even if they run out of money, they're still going to show up for work and figure it out, as opposed to a lot of the people I thought were strong, I invested in, and they're like, they hit a bump, and you're like, well, if you just cut your 12-person team down to 7, you would add this much runway, you'd have more time to figure it out. And I literally had one of them say, I just don't want to do that. I'd rather just wrap it all up and close the company. And I was like, okay, well, thanks. You just told me you're bluffing. You don't have it. I don't need to invest in your company ever again. Like literally, you don't have the ability to just cut 5 people to keep the dream alive. Well, then this isn't a dream.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think there's a lot of people in Silicon Valley. When we started off, people weren't coming here necessarily to get super rich. It was like they were coming because they were interested in technology. They wanted to try something new. They wanted to be an entrepreneur because they couldn't get a job anywhere else.
Yes,
it was, and then over the course of Silicon Valley becoming very successful and very, very common job path in the last 15 years, you attract people who are like high functioning people who could be getting paid a lot in, Wall Street or on Facebook, or maybe they came from those places and then they want to start a startup, but they don't necessarily have the same tolerance for pain that some of the that other people do when they like have no choice, or they're like a misfit, or they're just like, this is like the only shot I have.
Microacquire is a startup acquisition marketplace that cuts out the middleman. Basically, that means they help startups get acquired efficiently. If you're a founder looking to sell, Microacquire is free, private, and involves no middlemen. You know how it is. You try to get a deal going. There's somebody in the middle. They don't care about the parties involved in some cases. They just want to close a deal. And you really have to wonder, who are they working for, right? You're always wondering about incentives there. Well, you don't have to worry about incentives at Microacquire. To date, Microacquire has helped hundreds of startups get acquired. and they facilitated hundreds of millions in closed deal volume. Their platform includes over 100,000 buyers, including me. I'm paying for the service. It's pretty great. There are thousands of startups currently listed for sale, and hundreds of successful acquisitions have occurred so far. Founders get free and instant access to over 100,000 trusted buyers while staying totally anonymous. On the other side of the marketplace, buyers like me simply pay $290 a year for access to deals on the platform, which means you're getting rid of the looky-loos, right? Unless you're serious about this, you're not going to pay the $290. So Microacquire helps startups find buyers. It's as simple as that. They'll help you start conversations that can lead to an acquisition in just 30 days for free. Just go to try.microacquire.com/twist. Once again, try.microacquire.com/TWIST. I was about to say, like, it used to be like a bunch of misfits, awkward people, president and company included.
Yeah, exactly.
I was like, it's something to prove. Like, we absolutely have to make our mark upon this earth. Somehow we have to get something done and, be successful in some way, building some product that matters to some group of people. Talk a little bit about the fear of failure and how you've seen that drive people, because it can go one of two ways, right? I mean, it could make you a high performer, it can also make you paralyzed. How do you mentor this next generation as you invest in them and build companies with them to manage their own fear and anxiety?
Well, people ask me that a lot, right? Like, because, I've been through this whole personal journey kind of along those lines and come to a place where I'm in a much healthier mental state. And a lot of times people ask, like, hey, would you ever have started a company, or could you be successful and with that, your present mental state, right? Where I'm like a lot more accepting of whatever the universe delivers, and I'm a lot happier with myself, like self-accepting. And I think there's something, what I love about startups is it's the journey, right? A lot of people come in when they're in their early 20s, maybe early 30s, and they're super twisted. They're like, I have to be successful. I'm going to die.
Yes.
Like, it's like get rich or die trying, like 50 Cent, whatever, right? And they're like, they have this huge chip. That was me. Like, I had a huge chip on my shoulder. It was like I never accepted when I was a kid by my peers. And now the only way I'm going to do it is like, I'm going to be super successful and I'm going to prove something to the world, right? Obviously, that's not a very healthy mental state, because anytime we'd hit a speed bump on the journey of entrepreneurship, which for a guy who's starting a company with a camera on his head was like every day, right? So, I'd feel horrible. I'd be like, this is the worst. I'm like, my life is over. Like, I've, ruined it. I'm like, everyone else is ahead of me. I suck at this. I had huge imposter syndrome. And what I found is, like, the people who I know that are the most successful, they start somewhere there. They start with that chip. They start with the drive. But over the course of, like, you could start a $1 billion company, 10 years ago, I would have said 100 million, but now it's $1 billion company. And like, pretty much anyone in industry can make their company worth $1 billion, probably. But so the ones who go the real distance, the guys who I know, who are my friends who are CEOs of 10, decacorn companies or more, they always transition to, like, instead of doing it from a place of fear, which is where they would start off, doing it, finding their true purpose inside of there. And they don't have that, like, scarcity mindset or fear-based, decision making anymore. And so it's
so true.
It's a journey that goes through that, and that initial, like, scarcity mindset, like, need to prove something. That's like the rocket fuel that gets you launched, but it doesn't keep you in orbit.
It's very interesting that you bring up motivation like this, and you think about the hero's journey. I immediately thought of, like, Star Wars and Joseph Campbell and some of the stuff. And you're called into this life to build something. You have this fear. You have this, preternatural desire to be successful, to be somebody, to put a camera in your face, to be the editor of a publication, for people to know your name, to maybe put some numbers on the board. But those motivations, the fear motivation, the competitive motivation, the self-doubt, self-loathing, all that stuff, it's great short term. But like you're saying, once you've made a little bit of money and all of a sudden you sit there and you have some success and you bought your house or you have money in the bank, now you're sat there and you go, okay, wait a second, what's the next level here? And that's where you have to become a Jedi and maybe be the elder statesman, and find another level and become a missionary, and like have some higher calling. And I think did you watch by chance the Michael Jordan documentary?
I didn't, but I heard a lot about it. It seemed like
it's really required for anybody who's a founder, because he's the highest performer in the history of sports in all likelihood. In terms of competitiveness and drive, he clearly is. So, there's obviously people, Serena or, in baseball, other folks, but in terms of like drive, he's got like a sickness in him, like a deep sickness where he cannot enjoy the winning, nor can he enjoy the journey, nor can he enjoy the people who went on the journey with him. And he hasn't, played basketball for decades, and he is loved by everybody, and he's still bitter towards his teammates and the people who got him there. And you come away with it with this profound sense of sadness that he never got to evolve into that next person, as we're discussing here, that we see in other leaders.
And that's a tragedy, right? Like that's like, you don't want to be there. You don't want to be there. You want, like, to me, in my journey, like going through and starting Twitch and becoming successful. And, that was actually only a vehicle to like learn about myself. All the things I talked about were like, I was like super twisted and I did have all these hangups, and then just like be in a position where I could release them. And that's what I see that true value is. Like I like all the things I thought I wanted, like that I would be delivered by being successful, like, being popular or like having people accept me, whatever. It's like, it turns out none of those things really made a difference in my life. It was really about the lessons that I learned from once I'd gotten there and seen that it wasn't that important. It's nice for sure, but it wasn't that the most important thing. Then I could like move on to other, maybe higher purposes for myself.
It's a very common experience. I had a similar one after we sold our first company. I don't know if you had the same experience when you do your first sale, and all of a sudden you go from this fear of never having money and being broke all the time. And then all of a sudden the wire transfer comes in, and I was sitting there refreshing Bank of America and the wire came in. I'm sitting there for an hour like an idiot, refreshing my Bank of America account, and we sell Weblog Sync to AOL, and boom, this big wire comes in. And my wife goes by the room and she said, "Why are you crying?" And I said, "What?" And I didn't notice it, but a couple of tears had come down. And I said, "Oh, I didn't realize I cried." And she said, "You're crying because you got the money?" I said, "No, I'm crying because I never have to worry about not having money again." I just realized, like, I spent the first, 10 years as an adult and 20 years on the planet just constantly having this strange fear of never having money. And to have all that money, then it was like, oh, well, I've checked that box. And then it was like, okay, well, what now? Right? What now?
Yeah. Yeah. It was like, you're happy for a week or whatever. And then,
yeah.
And
But it is freeing in that you then feel, if you can find something else you love to do, you're free now to not have, you can start to think in a decade. I started thinking in like 5-10 years. I don't know how you think now about your career and the time you have left. I'm 50 now. How old are you now?
I'm 38.
You're 38, right? So do you now start thinking like, hey, where do I want to be when I'm 50? Where do I want to be when I'm 60? Do you start thinking like in decades, or you just think, what do I want to do this year in terms of a project? How do you manage your own psychology and your own time?
I think it's still, I never was a long-term planner, to be honest, when I was, younger in startups too. And then now it's the same. I just think about like, what do I love to do and who do I love to spend time with? And I have a rule that I only want to work on things where when I see the people I'm working with, it puts a smile on my face,
I like it.
And, cause it's like life's short. Like you got to spend time with certain people. Like I want to spend time with people where I enjoy their company. And then that's it. Like I just work on things that are interesting to me, and hopefully they intersect with things that I think are good to put out in the world. And,
All right. To everybody who's listening, this is a collaboration. First time we're trying it. We're streaming to both of our channels on YouTube. If you're a part of the This Week in Startups audience, you can go to youtube.com/JustinKanTV, Justin Kan TV, and subscribe to his channel. And there's a little bell next to the subscribe button. You click that bell, you'll get notified whenever Justin goes live or posts a video. You can do the same at youtube.com/thisweekin if you're so inclined. Tell everybody about what you're doing on YouTube now and what the response has been from young founders who obviously look up to you in a tremendous way.
Yeah, well, so on YouTube, I started thinking about YouTube about a year ago, and I was making this podcast. I am still called The Quest, which was kind of like inspired by my own story of like trying to go through being successful and then finding it a little bit hollow, and then finding some other things that were more meaningful to me. I noticed all these people had similar stories of like entrepreneurship or like in all these different categories, sports or entertainment. So I started doing this podcast, and then I was trying to hire someone to like help me promote the podcast. And I ended up posting in this Gen Z server, like a Discord server, to try to find someone young to like help me out with it. And got this response by this woman, Jen, who's like, very young product manager in tech. And she was like, you should have a YouTube channel. And I was kind of like, I don't know. I don't know if I want to do the work. Sounds like a lot of work.
It is a lot of work. Yeah.
And so she was like, look, I'll help you make it. I'll do all the editing. All you have to do is buy a camera, point it at yourself, and tell a story. And so I was like, okay, I'm someone who's like, I'm often very much like a yes and person. I'm like, hey, let's just try it out, see what happens. So I said, okay, I'll try it. So bought a camera, recorded a few stories, and she edited them, and they turned out really a lot better than I ever thought they would. And so we threw them up on YouTube, and they got a pretty good response. And then I just had a lot of fun with it. So I've been making videos ever since for the last almost a year now. And it's got a pretty good response from the tech community. I think I'm very vulnerable and open about like the things that happen, whether it was shutting down Atrium and, laying off 180 people, or the wins as well, and things I learned, things I'm not good at. And so, it's kind of an experiment, but it's pretty cool because people like it. I get a lot of positive feedback. I got texted this morning from a friend I had on the podcast, Harry Shuck, who's the founder of blanking on the name, $30 billion enterprise SaaS company. Well,
that narrows it down to 67 companies right now in this market. So many big companies in SaaS.
He was texting me and telling me one of his employees, he was in his Israel office, and one of his employees was like a huge fan and like said that, I inspired her to think. She was like, if Justin could do it, I could do it. I was like, that's so meaningful to me, like to get that feedback from people around the world for the content I've created. So I'm really happy to be doing that. And then I've also been making a YouTube podcast, which I basically copied. Like I watch All In. By the way, I'm like the biggest All In fan. I listen to every episode. Yeah. Oh, dude, you figured out. You're a great host. And sometimes your co-hosts don't give you enough credit for it. They started to more recently, but like for a long time, they didn't give you the credit for it. So I'll call that out.
I appreciate that. It's interesting because the public has been saying like, why are they giving you a hard time about your moderation skills? Like you literally keep the show moving. And right as I think somebody's getting boring or things dragging, you ask a good question, you're pivoted or whatever. It just comes from having done 1,200 podcast episodes. I kind of get a sense of when things are getting boring and when to move on to the next subject. But All In is some weird. It's weird how popular it's gotten so quickly. It's like creating a super team or something in the NBA, and it's become more than the sum of its parts.
Well, it's really it's funny because I spent a lot of time thinking about it because I'm a big fan and I love the content. Like I drive a lot between Northern California and LA, right? So I'll 8 hours and I'll listen to like a couple episodes on the drive, and then I was like, he's having so much fun doing this, or like these guys look like they're having so much fun. So I made a YouTube show. Like we'll do a show. I've got 3 of my other like kind of YC related friends, and kind of copy. Well, I was shameless. I was like, look, I'm just copying
There's been about 10 people who have said the same thing to me, and they're kind of trying to figure out their quartet. And I'm like, that's great. Get your besties together and do it. Yeah.
Because it was primarily motivated because you guys seem like you're having so much fun.
Oh, it's hilarious. Yeah.
But like people don't know behind the scenes, it's so much work to like, if you like corral your rich friends to get in one place and have like show up with like equipment and like
no idea.
Upload the videos. No, I have all the idea because I've done it with like,
now the public doesn't know.
With like Michael Seibel and Emmett Shears, my co-founders of the Twitch CEO, and like getting people to like upload a video on Google Drive or like to like have a headset, like
it's crazy.
It's surprising how. Yeah.
The first 25 episodes was me trying to get people to commit and then sending them headsets. And I just said, I'm going to commit to doing this. I have my own podcasting team. I got 7 people on the podcasting team between ad sales and producers and editors and everything. And I said, like, listen, just send them the equipment. And if they lose it, just send it to them again. Go down to run to their place, install the software, show them how to use it, walk them through it, do a tech check with them, get them to upload it, all this stuff. And something happened after the Robinhood episodes and that whole thing where we had when Robinhood shut down trading, yada, yada, and then Vlad came on the pod. The podcast went like 5 or 10x that week. Oh. And then Friedberg and Sachs and Chamath, I think for the first time got a taste of what it's like to something you and I have experienced when you get a lot of attention at once and everybody starts talking to you about it. And that's when they kind of clicked into it. And I said, if you want to be successful with this, we just have to do it every Friday. You have to mark off your calendars and tell your EAs and your assistants and your spouses that time is sacrosanct. You cannot change Fridays at 11. And I would say 4 out of 5 Fridays, they bought into that.
Yeah. It's funny. But
this week it hit number 42. The episode hit number 42 on all podcast episodes in the world, which is mind-blowing after 55 episodes or 56 episodes. Yeah.
It's amazing, but it's great. Let's say you did a good job of, I don't know if it's like you just picked your friends who you would balance each other, but you did a good job of
the origin story is Chamath pinged me and said, hey, I want to do the podcast. And I was like, yeah, you can come on This Week in Startups anytime. He's been on 6 or 7 times. And he said, no, I want to do a podcast with just the 2 of us. So you interview me, I interview you, you talk about startups, I talk about late stage, and we just chop it up. I was like, great, we're in the middle of a pandemic, I don't get to see enough, great. So we started doing it, and then we're like, you know what? Sachs wrote something really good about masks. And then we're like, yeah, and Friedberg talked a little bit about, his theories on this, and he's a science guy. Friedberg didn't have a Twitter handle at the time. And they both came on, and then it was like, wow, this is really working. And the only thing that is any debate now, I think, in the format is the amount of politics. I don't know how you feel about politics on the pod, but I'll just ask you, hey, what do you think? And for people in the chat room, what do you think about when we cover politics? Because it's been polarizing. Obviously, politics is the most polarizing thing.
No, I like it. I mean, because I'm somewhere, the problem, though, with any sort of group of like, your group or like my friends, it's like all got to be kind of like libertarianish purple in the middle. There's not enough. Yes. I think it's not actually divisive enough. Like there's not people are really taking far enough positions on opposite sides. I mean, sometimes you get Chamath and Sachs, but like really people are for like sensible policy based on like kind of some, utility maximizing function, right? Which is like, radical for like America perhaps, but like it's, Silicon Valley is kind of like just in the middle. And so I just don't feel like it's that extreme. And to me, it's a little bit like predictable.
Yeah, I agree that we're pretty like close to each other in this purple area where we, the two, which I think represents America and certainly represents the tech industry because we're used to not knowing the answer to a question, designing an experiment, aka product or service, deploying it in the real world and looking at the metrics and the anecdotal feedback and just saying, okay, let's iterate on that. Whereas in politics, you have to be like, I'm anti-immigration, I'm pro-immigration, no borders, all borders, torture people in cages or, let people just steal all of our jobs. It's just like, is there no thoughtful idea here? Why don't we run a test for 2 years, examine the results of the test, and then iterate on the test? And nobody can have that conversation in politics, which feels like it's the end of this grand experiment in democracy that you can't admit that you've changed your opinion about something.
Yeah, it's like the definition of political or like an issue becoming political is that it is something that you like have decided a priori before there is any sort of data, right? Which is an insane way to really run anything.
It's like, look at immigration. You and I have seen over and over again in our contemporaries, extraordinary people come to this country or their parents and absolutely create massive amounts of jobs, wealth, taxes, joy, and, further support this great democratic experiment known as America against the communists in the country, communists in the world, and the authoritarians in the world. And you try to talk about something like immigration and people are like, all or none. And it's like, how about a point-based system or now we don't have, people don't want to go to work. So why not allow some people in who want the jobs? Like, is the post-pandemic world and what we do for immigration, should that be the same as the pre-pandemic world? I don't know. Like we can't even have a reasonable discussion about it. How do you think about immigration in this country? Did your parents immigrate here or? I'm curious.
My dad was born here and my grandma on my dad's side was born here. So it's kind of like Chinese who came over in like, 19, like, I don't know, like early 1900s, right?
Wow.
But my...
Did they immigrate to San Francisco?
No, she was, my grandma was born in Ellensburg, Washington, which is like a small town in Washington State. But my mom immigrated here, part of like 10 siblings who immigrated here. So it would be called like a chain migration now.
Yeah. Where did she immigrate from? Did she immigrate from China?
She's Chinese, but she came from Malaysia. So she was Chinese in Malaysia. Yeah. So, to me, we should be finding the most talented people in the world, and we're educating them, and then we should be stapling a visa with their diploma to stay here, because that's the Silicon Valley. That's a pretty common thought in Silicon Valley, and I think we need like different quotas for different educational. It should be based on like the capacity of the United States to generate jobs in that area, and I think we've had like a huge capacity that we've like to generate technology focused oriented jobs. So like for engineering jobs, technology jobs, we want those people to stay and build wealth and create industries and companies. For other types of jobs, like that might not be the case. I mean, for farm worker jobs, we have like this huge capacity. People don't want those jobs in America. We should, maybe think about a different visa quota for that. And I think it should be job based.
That seems completely logical. Like, how many people can we actually assimilate into this melting pot that is America, so that they have a great experience and they become productive members of society? Obviously, it's such a popular place to come. You can't have everybody in the world come here, but you could have a lottery for people who could take entry-level jobs or trucking jobs that nobody wants because the ports are backed up, or, jobs working, in menial tasks that Americans don't seem to want to do. What's your best advice to young people regarding what to do in the early parts of their career? I'm thinking like, late high school and then into college, to prepare themselves for the world in this 21st century, which is obviously a lot different than the world you and I came into, where your degree was pretty important.
Yeah, I think the most important thing is to just optimize for learning. That's what I tell people. It's like, you want to take the job when you're younger, take the job or do the experience that's learning optimized. A lot of people have it backwards, where they're like, I want to, make money first, and then I'm going to do whatever I want and like go into the industry I want. But I think someone once told me like your 20s are for learning, your 30s are for earning. And
that makes sense.
Yeah, I really believe that. I think like when you're young, you should optimize for learning as much as possible. And that could be a job choice. It could be finding the right opportunity that exposes you to the most things. It could be like what you're learning in school, like technically or engineering wise. But I think optimizing for learning and breadth of learning is very important.
It does seem like coming to a startup where the startup is by definition resource constrained. If you come to a startup, typically there's no amount of work that you can't take on because they're short-staffed. And when I went to work for big companies, you would get in trouble for doing things that weren't your job. They'd say, hey, do your job. Don't do that. That's this person's job. You had 5 people doing one job, and at a startup, you got one person doing 5 jobs. Pretty much the best place you could wind up, no?
Yeah, exactly. Like startup, even if a startup doesn't work, you're going to learn a lot. And I know that sounds like something like the founder of a startup would say to try to convince like somebody to join. Yeah. But like one example is like, I just talked to a friend of mine, an employee who used to work for me. He was very young. He joined Atrium. Like he was, just a couple of years out of college, joined Atrium, and it didn't work, right? He left after like a year or whatever. It was kind of a cluster, all sorts of different reasons. But he left after a year. And obviously the company didn't work, but now he's running like a business that does like $5 million. He basically bootstrapped a business that's like doing, $5 million of revenue a year. And we had a catch up, and he told me this, and I was like, wow, and from Atrium, he probably just learned a bunch of things, what not to do, to be honest. Instead of raising $75 million and turning it into 25 or whatever, he raised no money and turned it into $5 million a year business. Great for him. And, that's an example of, I think, you can get something out of any experience, and experiences, even the ones that don't make you super financially successful, can prove to be really valuable to you later on.
Yeah, 100%. Oh, you know what I was going to ask you too, as a follow-up, what skills are easy to acquire or take the least amount of time to acquire, but have the biggest benefit out of startup or in tech or in a desired skill? In other words, I want to get a job in a startup, but in the next 6 months, what can I do every weekend, every night, instead of watching TV and playing video games? What can I learn? Developer is the obvious one. Learn
how to program smart contracts, right? Like if you
learn how
to, if you're a developer, learn how to like make Solidity, right? Or like embed yourself in let's say you don't want to be a programmer, you don't have programming skills, or it's not your proclivity. Like learn how to create community, because people are able to drive community online, especially are able to drive, like all of these, this momentum around these PFP NFTs, right? These profile picture NFTs, like it's like community driven, people driving, creating online movements. And I think that's like a invaluable skill set right now.
I think it's such a good one. I was trying to find a community manager. I realized it doesn't exist and I couldn't find any. And so I was like, I'm just going to hire smart people and have them figure it out. And we'll do trial and error. We'll look at other communities. But man, the people who run subreddits right now, or who are great on Hacker News or just awesome on Quora and answer people's questions, like, I don't think they understand exactly how valuable they are. Because if you can get 100 people to show up somewhere every day and talk about something and then get it to 500 or 1,000 or 2,000, that's the start of a movement right there. Like, I mean, the first 100 customers, the first 1,000 customers are the hardest. If you can get them all to coalesce in a Discord or a Slack or a subreddit, my Lord, that is like kerosene for startups, is it not?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, ultimately moving people or like getting people aligned to like move a certain direction or like engage, that's like a invaluable leadership skill set. I think that's,
super. The other one I love is if you're not into programming, maybe community is not your bag, being able to do mock-ups like UX, UI design, build a Figma or an InVision that's clickable. And then you're sitting there next to the founder or founders and they're talking about an idea and you whip it up in Figma and then you send it to your boss and you're like, hey, you were talking about this like little idea you had. I just made a couple mock-ups. All of a sudden you've manifested the founder's ideas into a reality that's tangible. And then you just took what was a discussion of an idea and then manifested it in a product in the real world. That is a superpower. That's like being a mutant in the X-Men. Like, it's such a powerful thing. You've probably worked with a UX designer who like grooves with you and you say something and they just make it.
Yeah. I'm working on this one new startup project, and we haven't written a line of code, but we have this amazing designer who's really breathed life into like what the applications built on top of this protocol could look like, and it's like makes a huge amount of difference in inspiring people, getting people to join the project.
Funding. I mean, as I tell people, like a picture's worth 1,000 words, a video is worth like 1,000,000, and a prototype is worth like 1 trillion. Like, once they have the prototype, they don't need any words. They take the mouse out of your hand, they start clicking, and they're like, I get it. No need to talk. You don't need to tell me the vision. I clicked on your clickable. And then how many times you get pitched for angel investing, and somebody sends you a Figma design or an InVision? Like, that's 1 out of 100 pitches. That should be 100 out of 100. Should come like, here's the Figma, here's the InVision. Go click, have fun. Here's a bubble.
Yeah, it makes it so much like more real, right? Like when human beings are visual animals, so like it makes it much, much more real to be able to see the product.
Yes, and when we see something visually and then we can click it, now again, that credibility takes another leap up. It's like just the act of being able to click it, even though that's just 2 images, basically, loading one page. It's like hyperlinks from 1994. From the Mosaic browser, it still releases something in a human. Like, screens want to be touched. They want to move and they want to click. And when you put that together, man, credibility goes way, way up. Here's a question from Andy O. I'm not sure from which of our communities. It could be from Justin Con TV or This Weekend on YouTube. Biggest missed opportunity and why? Biggest missed opportunity and why? What do you think?
I mean,
one come to mind?
So, like, I guess there's so many financially. I have a long list. I'm sure you have the same, like, of,
the anti-portfolio.
Airbnb, helping them get into YC. But like my co-founder, Emmett, was going to invest like $25K at a $300,000 valuation or something like that. And he never followed up. And we could have invested in that one. Like my friend Ben showed me Pinterest before it launched, and I just didn't get it. I was like, I didn't get it. I mean, even more recently, I'll tell you one recently, like a year ago, I almost invested in Whatnot. I really like the team, but then my
explain what it is.
Whatnot is like a digital, like a live shopping for collectibles, like a live shopping app. And they just raised money at a $1.5 billion valuation.
Wow. And they came to you, of course, because you're the king of streaming, yada, yada.
Yeah.
And even you didn't see that.
Well, it was like, I actually was like really excited about the team. And then the space itself was like, I was just kind of okay, whatever on the space. But then we had just invested in a bunch of companies and I kind of burned out on investing at that moment, that like one moment. Like it got me the wrong like week, right? And so then I was just like, let it go. And then obviously, I mean, it's funny. I emailed the founder, was like, oh, well, you proved me wrong. Like, it's amazing.
Yes.
Congratulations. But there's so many.
It's so many. You don't have to hit everything. For me, we're on Restream right now. The software is incredible. They contacted me like 3 years ago and I never responded because at some point my inbound peaked so much that I had to hire 2 researchers, 2 associates, and just a whole group of people just to respond to my emails coming in to make sure I don't miss stuff. And, apologies to people over the last 5 years who I never got back to. But, it's hard to hit super router status in the world. You've had to deal with this where it's just, you literally could have 10 of you and not respond, even but briefly to the people who are inbound. And so that was a tough one. And then, of course, before I was an angel investor and really was thinking about that, one of my friends was starting a car company. Another one was starting Twitter. And a third one was starting online poker or Zynga. And I didn't even think of asking or saying yes when they offered for me to invest. So, you can have your regrets, but I mean, when you wind up doing so well, I don't even think about that now. Like it's not even on my mind, like what I didn't hit. How do you deal with setbacks building a tech product? Are you realizing you have to change your tech stack, et cetera? It's a good technical blocking and tackling question, Justin. How do you deal with, God, you build something and you get the sunken cost and now you get this emotional wreckage of having to throw it away?
Well, I question, like, a lot of people want to rewrite their product all the time. And like, I just 9 times out of 10, or maybe like 4 times out of 5, it's probably like not necessary. I question whether that's truly necessary. I think for engineers, and I've been in that position as an engineer, it's like, it's easy to say, oh, if we rewrite it, it's going to solve everything. And like, oftentimes that wasn't the right move. It was like an investment of resources that didn't really yield like the result that we wanted, or like create all different downstream mistakes. So I would challenge the assumption. Yeah.
It's sometimes people don't want to take the hard medicine of, hey, we have a problem with product market fit, or we don't understand our customers. So what can we do that doesn't involve engaging the customer and figuring out this fundamental problem? I know what we can do. We can upgrade all the servers, move to this new thing, rewrite the stack, and we'll kick this can down the road of the problem of like, do consumers even want what we're building for 6 months? And it's better sometimes to just stay in the same code base, iterate, and figure out what your customers want. I think that was the genius of Eric Ries and Steve Blank with the Lean Startup, is they were like, don't invest all this technical baggage, build an MVP. Now you have all the no-code platforms, Webflow, Bubble, Notion, Squarespace, whatever, if this, then that. You can build all these really interesting MVPs and just test it and see if people like it. So much easier.
Yeah. 100%.
Okay. What's the most misunderstood business or crypto currently? That's a great question. What do people not understand in the crypto space that you think is brilliant and going to change everything? I'm building on the question. Or in the regular world. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I've been pretty red-pilled on crypto now. I was always holding it, but now I'm really excited for the projects, like kind of, I was never super interested in DeFi. It seemed like a lot of crypto was just speculation on things, but now I feel like there are actual applications that people are creating, and they're consumer applications. And so I'm pretty excited about what I think is the most interesting thing about crypto to me is it's a way to distribute incentives, right? It's a way to change incentives. So by allowing people to have ownership through this token, they basically flip from, someone who's just like a random person to somebody who's like incentivized to evangelize this community. And, one of my friends started this company called Brain Trust, or project called Brain Trust, which is like distributed Upwork, right? It's like a freelancing network. And they're making it on crypto. It's a crypto project. I'm like, why should this be crypto? I just didn't get it for years. And finally, he explained it to me as like, well, if you think equity is a great way to incentivize employees in Silicon Valley to build something great, imagine if you had a vehicle for giving equity to like 100,000 freelancers who make their market. And that's what they did. And, now they're I think the protocol's worth $2 billion or something around there. And
BTRST. And so if you are a freelancer, you get some Brain Trust coins as part of being in the network. I guess in addition to getting money, or maybe you substitute one or the other. It looks like usebraintrust.com is the website. Really interesting. The thing that's got me, so I really think that's interesting. In other words, the thing that I hated most, all these ICOs and the scamming and this anonymous, like, grift and trying to find a new bag holder and pump and dumps and all that kind of stuff. That's the most negative framing of it, and like a horrible behavior where people are going to lose their money. Then on the other side, well, wait a second, if properly deployed and people aren't speculating, but they're participating, well, that's super inspiring. It's a way to give equity to everybody in a distributed way where there's no central authority to it. And so if the token grows like crazy, everybody wins and everybody's incentivized to make it grow. The problem is like making it grow by, being toxic and being like, have fun being poor. You don't own any Bitcoin. Haha. You're going to be poor is like gross. Yeah. It has to be considered.
Exactly. And it's like equity, right? Like there's been examples of people who are, immoral startup founders who are like, hey, instead of taking a salary, you're going to get paid entirely in equity. And then they the whole thing's a fraud or whatever. And then people, employees lose their shirts. And that's like, obvious. Equity is a tool, right? To that can be used in a way that is great for your employee base. And it can be used in a way that's probably exploitative of your employee base.
Sure.
And the same thing is true of like creating a token system, like a crypto token. It can be used in a way that's like extremely exploitative, which is, like some scam, pump and dump. Or it can be used in a way that incentivizes a pool of people to create a shared outcome, right? Or to try to move towards a shared outcome or to push some new vision of the world.
Building infrastructure to do certain things in the world, whether it's Filecoin for file storage, or there's one for music now and distributing music files, or, doing money transfer and running services, all interesting. The thing that's got me, the bug I can't get rid of is the DAOs. I keep watching this and going, when do I jump in? Like, I have funds. I've got a syndicate. My syndicate is basically a DAO, except I make the decision. They decide I decide which company we're going to put forward. They decide how much they're going to put into it. If I could do that on a global basis and have an unlimited supply of pools of capital come in, they may not be best to decide which companies get funded, but maybe there is something to that, So I've been looking at these DAOs, not for trading NFTs like Flamingo and other stuff, but I wonder if like venture capital or, the syndicate or an accelerator could have a DAO. Like if there was a YC DAO or a Launch DAO or a Techstars DAO, how would that work? Have you thought about that? Have you had conversations about that? What do you think of DAO?
There's some YC alumni who are creating a DAO to do like investments in YC companies and like build a community around, doing the investments. And I think it's interesting. I like the idea of like a DAO as an organization, a way that humans organize, right? Right now you have like corporations, you have nonprofits, but like a DAO is like something that's a little bit different. And we're still like figuring out how that works exactly. But I like the idea of it. And I'm
what part of the idea do you like of that?
I like the idea of like, it's like so with an employee, with like a company, right? You have people who are employees or you have people who are or not, right? Like it's kind of binary.
Shareholders, employees,
yeah, shareholders, employees, and then like
customers.
That's it, right? Customers. Yeah. With a DAO, it's kind of like, my understanding, seeing how some of these like new DAO startups are, being created. They have, they're actually like allowing people to sit somewhere between like full employee and like, freelancer, and they have like can make more. They're basically. It's like the whole thing is like run by freelancers almost, right? And then how much they're getting paid is kind of voted on by like a community prioritization. And it's a very democratic way of running an organization, which may be good for certain types of organizations, right? Yeah. Like, I'm not convinced that like every company should be a DAO, because in some companies it's better for it to be a benevolent dictatorship, right? We want one person who's like, this is the direction. I'm the product genius. You do what I say, right?
Yeah,
and if you don't want
with
to,
Elon, right? You're building a spaceship. Like you can't be iterating on 17 different designs concurrently and voting. Like you need to pick a design and iterate and get to Mars.
Yeah, and exactly. And you want Elon, who's going to give his blood, sweat, and tears to figure that out, right? Like he's in charge. You want that guy, right? And but I think there's interesting, like, I've always been interested in, just like every other techie. I've been interested in how do you create like a new city or town, and I think that would be a project that, you could make a DAO from the beginning, because it's like it's inherently democratic, right? But like, and so you could, I think the DAO has an opportunity to create like new forms of organization and self-organization. I think is really fascinating, and I'm not even sure that we know what they're going to be good for yet.
They're programmable and they're votable and they're online and social. So there's like a very interesting sort of comparative here. You have LLCs, structures with partnerships in them. These are like programmable LLCs in a way. And they, can share the decision making. And when the tools come out where you can go to a website, just like building a Squarespace website or whatever, or Twilio, and you just type in what you want your DAO to do. You write the code. Okay, here's how we do voting. Here's what happens if people want to sell their shares and get out of the DAO. And you think about Burning Man and like camps. People can build camps. They get a certain amount of space. They self-organize, and then the camps make up Burning Man. The city idea is really clever because it's like, okay, we're going to put a bunch of money together. We're going to buy a city, or we're going to put a bunch of money together. We're going to buy 3 cities, and we're going to develop them. And you can live in 1 or 2 or 3 of those cities, however many you want, and you get to vote on them. So do you want to have fiber as our first project to bring fiber into the community, or do you want to bring satellite into the community? What do you want to, how are we going to bring internet to the community? How are we going to do education in the community? Could be really interesting, right? And people have skin in the game and they own shares in the community. I find it super inspiring, like to really rethink all of that. So what is the highest leverage use of time? What is the highest leverage use of time? I guess I'll add to that your time. What is the highest use of Justin's time?
I think for me, it's like to inspire other people. That's what I think my highest leverage use of time is. Like, I'm not gonna be the programmer, program something myself anymore. I'm not even gonna be the manager who like manages a project. What I really love to do is like, I love to sell a vision and excite people, like catalyze a group of people to do something. And so for me, I spend a lot of my time figuring out how can I inspire people to like build things that I want to see in the world. So my YouTube channel is like that. It's like, hey, people want to build startups. I want to help them on their hero's journey. And so a lot of what I talk about is like just my videos are about trying to help inspire people. And then the projects I work on, it's like, I'm not going to be the CEO anymore. You don't even want me as the CEO. I'm like we talked about earlier. I'm
kryptonite for CEOs. Don't make me the CEO.
Yeah, I'm too rich now. I'm like not, I'm not do or die anymore. I'm the guy who's like shutting down the startup instead of laying off, 7 people. Like, because I'm like, I don't need the pain anymore. But what I can do is help inspire a new CEO who is hungry and really wants to go to do his best and to help him or her and get off the ground and get running. And so that's what I love to do now. And I think that's the highest leverage use of my time.
I think that's brilliant. To answer it myself, I'd say I've turned out to be a really good friend to people. I don't know how that happened. That's like my great skill set. I like to think I'm good at communicating in media. I like to think I'm good at investing or, building media brands, and I enjoy those things. The thing actually is being a bestie to people, like being a good friend to people, whether it's somebody who I invest in their company or just somebody in my personal life. Being there to help people solve their problems and being of service to them is, I think, the highest order, or the one where I feel the most joy, and I'm lucky to have a lot of friends who are very successful. And, it's nice to be on the short list of people who they say, can you help me with something? Like, okay, sure. I'd love to help you with something. It feels great to be of service. So you think we have some overlap there. This question's great. How do you go from working at a no-name tech company, Google, I'm guessing, one of the bigger players, let's say this is from a standpoint of a data scientist. So I'll expand that to, hey, maybe you could become a player yourself as a data scientist, or find become a bigger player to a bigger player. How do you level up either way, becoming indie or becoming bigger part of the machine? This is from the point of view of a data scientist. I'm sure you have some ideas.
Yeah, I think, I saw a lot of people do this actually in the early days of Justin TV or Twitch. They would go from no name or maybe a student to working for us, and then they'd get a job like Facebook and go over there. Yeah. And, I think that it's just about finding, you're working at this company and it's kind of like what I talked about earlier, where you're optimizing for learning. It's like, go do the projects that are going to challenge you, do the projects that are, where you're going to learn a lot, and then figure out how, be good at articulating or learn how to articulate the things you learned and how you surmounted those challenges, and then go interview at a better company or better job and like be able to articulate what you learned. And that is the key. And, that's when you're interviewing someone, like, this is true for startups. I'm sure you feel the same way, but also for like employees, it's like, I want to hire people where I learn from them. And so generally in an interview process setting, you're looking for like, can this person do these jobs? Can they do this job, build this company or whatever? But then you're also like, oftentimes I'm looking, what do I learn from this interaction? And the people I learn from, that's who I want to hire.
All right, everybody who's watching, give us smash the thumbs up button on both channels. Remember, you can subscribe to Justin's amazing channel at youtube.com/JustinKanTV, Justin KANTV, and you can subscribe to youtube.com/thisweekin for This Week in Startups. Go ahead and smash the thumbs up button on both channels. That basically hacks the algorithm at YouTube. You smash the thumbs up, you hit the subscribe, more people find these videos, more people get advice from it. I think, becoming a media brand is something that people think will take a lot of work. It's really simple. If your name is Dina and you're in data science and you become Data Science Dina and you change your, Twitter handle, your Instagram handle to that, but once or twice a week, you write a blog post or do a short video or interview somebody in audio only or make an infographic or do a thread on Twitter, you would be surprised after 52 weeks of doing that, the consistency of publishing, how much higher your profile will get. And then people will come find you. So instead of trying to convince people over long emails or whatever, demonstrate it in the real world. When you demonstrate in the real world that you're good at something, my God, the inbound goes crazy. Because we as leaders, and Justin and I have to make a lot of hiring decisions, right? Or investment decisions. You're looking at a group of people. Let's say there's 10 people. And 2 of them are out there in the world doing stuff that is related to the need you have as a leader who gets to decide who gets the job, who gets the gig, who gets the financing. And the other 8 people are telling you they can do it. And 2 people are showing you can do it. Who are you going to go with, Justin?
Exactly. The person who's showing, that's always a good look.
Yeah. I mean, you might take a chance on somebody if there's not somebody out there showing it, but man, just thinking about like, what could a data scientist do? Just talking about data science problems, or becoming the number 1 or number 2 person answering data science questions on Quora. All of a sudden, if somebody came to me and said, I've answered 1,000 questions about startups and angel investing and podcasting, I'd love to come work for you on Quora. Here's my thing. I got 10,000 followers. I'd be like, okay, you're hired. You couldn't have done that. You answer 1,000 questions, like you're good at it. Something happens after 1,000 things. Like the 10,000 hours, I think after 1,000 podcasts or 1,000 Quora questions, you're going to be good. All right, listen, this has been great. Justin, you're awesome.
Thank you.
It's great to know you.
You're awesome, Jason.
Well, honestly, I feel like you and I never really got to be bros, but we see each other once in a while, socially or otherwise. But I've always respected your absolute enthusiasm for what we do in our industry of creating the new and just being creative and relentlessly supportive of other people. It's very easy to make the money, kick the ladder out from behind you. And I've always just respected your enthusiasm for helping other people and building cool shit in the world. So I appreciate your time and just knowing you. It's good to know you.
Thank you. It's good to know you. And thank you for the podcast, by the way. You provided me countless of hours of entertainment.
It really has been a pleasure. People always say, I went to a party this weekend. Literally the first 4 people at the party said, I love All In. On the way into the party, it was an industry party. So, but I thought 4 out of 4 is pretty crazy. And they all said the same thing. I just love it. I look forward to every week. And I said, I got a new response from people. I was like, that's so amazing. You love it half as much as we love making it. So thanks for tuning in. It's like, it's such a joy to make it every week and making it fun every week. And so I wish you luck with your All In with Michael and your other co-founders. And we'll see you all next time on Justin Kan TV or This Week in Startups or wherever you're watching this.